I'm looking for something outside the Bible, because to me that's more the claim as opposed to the proof.
So to try and compare the Egyptian religion of Osiris and Isis to the Gospels is not accurate.
So this college student wants proof outside of the Bible for Jesus, and Cliff gives an amazing answer, so let's get right into it.
You're talking about first-hand accounts. What are the first-hand accounts that are not in the Bible?
Okay, some of the first-hand accounts.
The first-hand accounts are in the Bible. That's why they're in the Bible, because they were with Jesus and talked with Jesus and ate with Jesus. Those are just writings and manuscripts that we formed and put them into a single book.
That are not in the Bible are the Gnostic Gospels, that are obviously coming from a philosophical position of Gnosticism, which taught the material, the physical is evil, the spiritual is good. And that's why the hero of the Gnostic Gospel of Judas is Judas Iscariot. Well, why would he be the hero? Because he helped Christ get rid of his body. So he's the hero. But you see, it is laced with this Gnostic presupposition that this is evil and the spirit is good. Whereas Genesis to Revelation insists both this and the spirit, the soul, are good because God created both. That is why taking care of your body, if you read the Bible, is so important, because your body's a gift from God. It's not to be trashed. That's why suicide is wrong, because suicide is murdering yourself.
Yes.
And the scriptures say, no, life is a precious gift from God, so don't murder someone else and don't murder yourself.
Yes, we were made in the image of God, and our body is very, very valuable. And
care of your body, but also take care of your soul. So those are the Gnostic Gospels. Now, a Jewish historian named Josephus wrote about Jesus as an historical person. In Antiquities 18.3.3, Josephus talks about the death and supposed resurrection of Christ. In the Mishnah, which is some of the hostile commentary of the Jewish people, there are hostile references to Jesus as a false prophet. So, unmistakably, Jesus was an historical person. The question is he God in human form?
Yeah, I guess that kind of more touches on the real essence of my question. Is
right.
Where else is the divinity talked about for him other than in the Bible? Like, is there perhaps an atheist historian that was there during the time that was like, holy crap, this guy's actually doing miracles? Or is he...
Well, then he wouldn't be an atheist. I think, first of all, there's no atheists. Well, not like there is today. But Josephus didn't believe that Jesus was God. He believed that people thought that he was God. There's a difference.
Was he just talking about where he was going and happened to leave happy Christians in his wake?
Well, obviously, the Romans were very upset by followers of Christ who would not buy into emperor worship, who insisted that Jesus was Lord. So obviously the Romans were well aware of the fact that Christ followers insisted that he was God, and that's why they wouldn't buy into worshiping Caesar, and that's why they got thrown to the lions in the amphitheater in Rome. So obviously the Romans, who were not followers of Christ, were keenly aware of the fact that these Christ followers insisted Jesus was actually God in human form, and I'm sorry, we're not going to worship the emperor.
I'd like to actually disagree with that account, because see, I really don't think that the Romans cared much or knew anything at all about Jesus while he was alive, or even for a long time afterward.
Hey, he got called out. That's so funny. That's so not true, though. We see they were talking about how they needed a scapegoat, and they blamed a lot of like those massive fires on the Christians. They also just talked about Christians or like people who followed Christ in a certain way.
It seems more that the temple officials were the ones who were threatened by Jesus' message within the religion of Judaism, because let's remember Jesus was a Jew,
right?
And he was speaking about Judaism.
But Cliff here wasn't talking about when Jesus was alive. It was later on. Obviously, yes, the Pharisees and the officials and the high priests were worried about the power aspect. But at the end of the day, the Romans still did kill him.
Specifically because it was the air he breathed, it was his environment.
Right.
So it seems more likely to me that instead of somehow the emperor knowing about a fisherman going around and speaking badly about Roman gods, it was more Jesus' Jewish peers who became incensed at this just because of the kind of message, and also, I mean, I believe that Jesus, the lens that's focused on Jesus is focused after his death, not while he's alive.
Okay, who did Nero take to light his gardens? Nero was the Roman emperor. Who did Nero use to put tar on to light his gardens? And he blamed him for the burning of Rome, when actually he burned it.
Christians.
Do you all know that? Christians, okay?
But that's
So-
centuries later.
No, that's 60s. That's in the 60s AD, Nero. All right? So you're right. Jesus was a Jew. He lived in Palestine. Jesus never went to Rome. But faith in Christ, because of his resurrection, spread like wildfire.
Here, let's see. Nero ruled. Okay, he was right about the 60s. Christians became an easy target. Nero wasted no time. He arrested and tortured all the Christians in Rome before executing them with lavish publicity. Some were crucified, some were thrown into wild animals, and others were burned alive as living torches. Wow, that's crazy. Cliff was right about that too. Yes, the Roman Empire, Nero is said to have blamed Christians for the Great Fire of Rome, which occurred in AD 64. Historian Tacitus. Oh, wow. I thought that was later on. But that's true. So literally in the 60s, he was completely right. That's only 30 years after Jesus would have died. He's already blaming Christians in Rome. That's wild.
Went to Rome, and in the 60s, which is only 30 years after Christ died and rose from the dead, Christians are tarred by Nero, put on sticks, and lit to light his garden.
Yep, that's true.
So that's a Roman emperor. So obviously the Romans were highly offended by Christians who insisted, no, we cannot worship Caesar, we will worship Jesus for he is Lord. And there was some tension there, obviously, to the point of martyrdom.
Reptiles are very brutal in their behavior, and as you go up and up and up, mammals, whales, killer whales, bears, things like that, as you keep on going up, you find more empathy and intelligence, and truth be told, a lot of it is chemical reactions. If there is anything out there, I don't think we know what it is, and when we affix ourselves to a religion, it's a way to be sure, but the irony is you can't really be sure, because I think it's a way to ground yourself, and it's good if you can't, I guess, accept the bleak reality that the only thing we know is what we see and what the matter and energy are.
Okay, but can you live that out?
Yes, easily, because I believe in human justice, human empathy, compassion. I don't think you need to have divine reward or divine retribution for your actions to necessarily encourage the behaviors, but it does make it easy. I won't argue that. It does make it easy to make people think that way.
But wait a second. My whole point to you has been, you hold so wonderfully to justice as a real value. You hold so beautifully to empathy as a real value. Sir, as you pointed out, as I tried to point out to you, if there is no God, justice and empathy are simply biochemical reactions. Do you really buy that?
I buy it entirely, because actually religion itself is a construction of this. Religion itself is a moral compass created by certain people to do that, and they use all these stories to convince people that things are real. And also the god Horus in Egypt was born of a virgin, Isis, the son of the only god Osiris, birth heralded by the star Sirius.
Oh, wow. He's literally comparing the god of Horus to Jesus. I hate when people do this. Nowhere is close. Let's have used the example of someone doing this is someone just grabs and starts shooting into a barn, and when they go into the barn, they see something they hit and then draw a target around it. It's like they're just spraying and hoping they find some correlation, but it's completely different. People want to use it all the time, though.
And he also martyred himself. So we can say that there's many similar stories that have these things. They're not necessarily evil, but are they necessarily true is my only point.
Sir, when you study Horus and Osiris and Isis, there is absolutely no historical claim that a virgin gave birth to a child, and there is no historical claim that someone rose from the dead. So to try and compare the Egyptian religion of Osiris and Isis to the Gospels is not accurate. That is total mythology, and the Egyptians are very open about that. They're
Yeah.
not making an historical claim.
And it's no different. Osiris, get this, was killed, cut up into 12 pieces, and spread out around the world. And then Isis, the sister, finds all of the pieces and puts them back together. And then apparently after that makes a baby. And then that's how Horus comes along. It's so different. Nowhere's close. And Egyptians, they don't act like it's a historical event. It's mythological, but also they just say that's how the gods came about or something.
It's all mythology. The claim of the New Testament is history. This historically occurred.
So you think because people have a different interpretation of something, just because somebody saw it, like me and this dude right here,
Yeah.
could completely talk about this event right here in completely different ways. So my friends are going to take that history. His friends are going to take his history.
Yeah.
So how is that more historically accurate than me going up and like taking a picture or video evidence, which is technically scientific history through the use of, capturing an image? How is us talking about it and relating our experiences more accurate than that right there?
It's real simple. If you and you are standing here, seeing me, talking with me, if you go away and say, Cliff never spoke out here, you're wrong. If you say Cliff was out here and spoke, you'd be right. Now, your evaluation of what Cliff said is totally different, and that's understood, but that's not historic. Historical information is not your evaluation or your evaluation. Historical information is Cliff was out here and I spoke with him. And if he says, no, Cliff wasn't out here, and you say Cliff was out here, then we have a contradiction, don't we? So that's history. History is, I saw this happen. This occurred. And you write it down. Guess what? That's what the New York Times and the LA Times are all about. Who saw what happened? Did this really happen or not? And you don't pull out biology and chemistry and physics to prove what you saw. Instead,
Yep.
it's big.
We know Jesus was alive and a historical person for the same reason we know Abraham Lincoln was a historical person. We have more evidence for Jesus and more manuscripts written about Jesus than Alexander the Great by far. Doesn't even compare.
You saw it, and you are a trustworthy, truth-speaking person, and you write it down what you saw. That's history. It's that simple, guys. It's not that complex.
But my history teacher would tell me that the correct way that I analyze history and acquire knowledge about history is comparing verbal sources from first and second hand sources, as well as physical artifacts, cross-comparing them via the scientific method in order to reach some level of veracity.
Good.
In that sense, it's totally attributed to the
So
science.
archaeology is important when it comes to history. If there's no archaeological evidence for the island of Atlantis, then please don't tell me about something occurring on the island of Atlantis. It doesn't exist. But if you're talking about Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem, Rome, all of a sudden we're talking about archaeologically verifiable places.
Everything that we find in archaeology is always backing up the scriptures. There's never something that we find that completely contradicts anything that we would have known about Jesus. That's what's amazing. We find things over and over and over, and it helps us to actually have more assurance in Jesus.
Where Jesus was born, where he grew up, where he ministered, and then where his followers spread.
But other people were born and died in Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem.
Right.
And so what makes it exclusive to Jesus that just because these places existed, it somehow adds to the veracity of the accounts of Jesus in those areas?
Well, remember I gave you 4 tests to use to determine historical reliability. Internal consistency, literary style.
Say the Gospels fail with internal consistency, but that's just my view.
Yeah, they don't fail. The Gospels pass with flying colors, internal consistency. There are no contradictions in the Gospels.
I mean, except for the couple that I mentioned
No.
earlier.
What couple?
The 2 genealogies are not contradictions. It's a difficult question. We agreed on that.
But neither are they facts, because you're talking about people who are not historians. They're not historians at all. They're going back thousands of years in history and claiming a genealogy for a person that they could not possibly know. Not only is that a contradiction, it's a fabrication.
No, it's no contradiction.
But it's a fabrication. Not only is it a contradiction.
What's the evidence that it's a fabrication?
I don't need evidence that it's a fabrication, because no.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, well, but here. Okay, well then here's my evidence.
I have given you evidence. It's not a fabrication. Now, what's your evidence that it is a fabrication?
In the same way that I would cross-examine different historical sources and compare one to the other, I can look at that source, I can look at the person who is supposed to have written it, who does not claim themselves to have written it. There is no first-person reference to any author.
So what?
Well, because of that, but what I do know is that you're claiming that these people were, if they were the true authors, they were followers of Jesus, first-hand followers, first-hand accounts.
Yeah.
So they're not writing in a language that they would have understood. They're writing about events they couldn't possibly have known about, because scientific history has yet to come along.
Whoa. How do you know they're not writing in a language that they would have never understood? I'm sorry, but Greek was very well known. It was the currency, it was the trade. Everyone needed to know Greek as well as their native language in order to work and sell, for the most part.
It has to be a fabrication. These genealogies must be a fabrication. How could they know what kind of genealogy? It's a mythical tradition within their religion, these genealogies. They're drawing on mythical traditions.
No, sir. The Jews kept very accurate genealogies. Secondly, Alexander the Great made sure that Greek was the common trade language. That's why the Gospels are written in Greek. Greek was like what English is today. English is the common trade language. And so in the first century, due to the conquest of Alexander the Great, Greek was the common trade language. That is why the Gospels are written in Greek.
They're not written in trade Greek. Some are written in literary Greek, which is even less.
No, they're written in Koine Greek, which was the Greek of that time. Koine Greek.
But some of the Gospels, especially John is written in a metaphysical, literary type of Greek that a first-hand follower of Jesus could not possibly have had a masterful grasp
That is
of.
totally false.
They just could not.
I had to read John in Greek. It's very simple Greek. Now, John is obviously far more philosophical, far more theoretical than Matthew, Mark, and Luke are. You have all the I am statements of Jesus. I am the resurrection of the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. So yes, John includes more the symbolic teachings of Christ, but that is not something that John was incapable of doing. It's very simple Greek. In fact, when you learn Greek, John is the first gospel you read in Greek because it's the easiest Greek to read.
I'm saying that legitimacy is whatever happens within reality. And what will happen if everyone kills each other is everyone will die. And that's just what will happen. Now, luckily, I feel that humanity is moving in another direction. And I hope we continue to do so, but I really do believe we can do that just by saying, hey, I wouldn't like you to kill me. I'm not going to kill you. I really think we can be interconnected enough to enhance our empathy without a prime source.
That doesn't work. As nice as that maybe seems, you can't just be like, hey, everyone, let's get along. Because what happens is, you might think we're getting along, but really people are stabbing you in the back. Everyone in the entire world will never get along.
The basis of evolutionary psychology is that we're supposed to want to evolve and make our genes spread. So we're not going to kill everyone because we want our species to continue and thrive. Thus, that's why we're nice to each other and we don't disrespect each other, because we want to make sure that everyone else will thrive with us. Our genetics want us to continue living. It's something that part of us are ingrained with. It's just how evolution happens. We're supposed, whether we want to or not, we're going to evolve. But that's what our genes are wanting us to do. That's why we want to reproduce. That's why we want to keep moving.
Evolution teaches the survival of the fittest.
That's not true. Evolution teaches survival of the best fit. It doesn't have to be the fittest. It doesn't necessarily mean the top-notch person. It just is whoever's best at that time, at that environment. It's all in the environmental context.
And that's a big reason why we keep
That's the same thing.
Being nice to each other is because we need each other to survive. Back whenever we were hunting the plains and everything, we needed a large group so that we could stay alive and we would fight off predators and be able to sleep through the night with someone watching.
Okay. And all I'm saying is there is more to my relationships than a desire to survive. I am convinced that we're able to love each other, to give to each other, to sacrifice for each other. I am convinced that we're able to take care of handicapped people and promote their well-being. I'm convinced that we're able to stand against racism and to stand for the value and dignity of all of human life. But evolution does not give the basis, atheistic evolution does not give the basis for the value of any human life. It just happens. And if you put it so well, Ryan, it just happens. So if what just happens is that I want his money, and so I go up and knife him to get his money, that just happens. There's nothing wrong with it. It just happens. Or if I want to go up to him and give him money out of my wallet so he can have a better dinner, that just happens. My point is, there's more to reality than just what happens. There's a value of justice, a value of love, that is not a chemical reaction.
That's good. I think Cliff absolutely crushed it in these just random, sporadic topics that they were bringing up every time. He did great. It was pretty simple to debunk each one. So yeah, guys, if you've been feeling discouraged or feeling like you have doubts, I encourage you to keep on trusting in Jesus and put your faith in him, because I know it will be worth it. At the end of the day, he's longing to have a relationship with you. And if you've never decided to follow Jesus, I encourage you to do that today. In the description below, you will be able to click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. Do that today.